Alright, what is up guys? So today I'm going to be going over how to enhance your brand photos. And this might seem very simple, it might seem not that professional, but I promise I'm going to give you guys one quick tip and I'm going to apply it to a few of these images right here. And it'll take your brand photos to the next level, and it might not be noticeable. The client might not say, oh wow, like what did you do to this photo? But this subtle change, I've seen it, and when I see brand photos, I look for it, and I can tell a clear difference when people actually take the time to highlight the brand's product or not. So I just want to dive in and show you guys this. So I just went into a few brands that I've worked with, pulled out some images. I believe most of these already have a slight edit on them. If anything needs to be changed, I will. So maybe for that, just drop the highlights. Bring up saturation a little bit, and all of these I'm going to be editing in Photoshop, and I'm going to be using Adobe Camera Raw, and mainly I'm just going to be using Layer Mask to do selective edits through Camera Raw. I'm actually just going to go through a few of these, get them loaded up in Photoshop. Alright, so now that these are loaded in Photoshop, as always for anything in Photoshop, I'm going to do Command J to make a copy of my background layer. And all of these are going to just follow the same suit. So I'm going to do filter, camera raw filter. And I'm going to zoom in. The product in this is the hat. It was Colorado Limited. So I'm going to bump the exposure. And sometimes those highlights get a little too much, so I'll drop those. Just want to really brighten up the product. I'm only looking at the product as I edit this. Bring up the vibrance. And you can see before and after of the hat. Maybe dehaze a touch. That looks good. Click OK. And obviously now the whole photo is too overexposed, but I'm going to put a layer mask on this. I'm going to invert it to take the effect away. Then I'm going to grab my brush tool, and I'm going to use a white brush because I'm painting on a black layer. And I'm going to put this at 100% opacity. And then bracket keys to make my brush smaller. And then I'm just going to go over this relatively roughly, and then go back and change anything if I need to with the opposite color brush. But that looks pretty good. I am going to switch my brush to a black brush because I went over a little bit here, and that is a giveaway for sure. Cool. Alright, so I'm going to zoom out. This is very subtle, but before, after. Before, after. So mainly what I'm doing with this is just kind of giving the photos a little bit of kind of a glow. It's just a little subtle enhancement. And in this photo, you know, it's more of a wide, it's not really a portrait photo. So it's not, the effect isn't as well seen, but we can hop into this and do the same. Copy of the background layer with Command J. Go up to camera raw filter. Same thing, bump the exposure quite a bit on this one because this is kind of a darker image. Drop the highlights a little bit and bring up the vibrance. Just kind of get it where you want, and you see the before and the after. There we go. And I don't want this on the whole photo, so I'm going to layer mask, Command I, invert, then come back to a white brush. Make this bigger and just do the same thing. Just gonna kind of brush that edit we just did in Camera Raw onto the hat. And oops, I went over a little to the left side. I'll fix that in a second. So now switch brushes. Just get that because I know I went over. And come back, and I'm going to do the backslash key, and this kind of shows you what you've brushed. So you can just get a little bit more finer of a selection, and I'm not going all the way to the edge because there is a feather on this, so should be doing the job just fine. Backslash, and now I can do before, after. That is too much, but I'm going to drop that to maybe 80%. That looks pretty natural. And you can see before, after. It's just really making it pop. When you see the before and after, it kind of looks heavy. But even subtly, before, after, like 60%, I think that looks much better. the the product is just kind of screaming. It's really pungent, you know, it's popping out of the photo. I think it just looks much better. Just moving on, and do the same thing for this one. This one was taken at nighttime around Times Square. That's why there's an abundance of colors. So I'm going to bring up the exposure on this, drop the highlights, and I'm actually going to bring up the clarity on this because it's a watch, so you really want to be able to just have that punching out. Maybe just a touch of vibrance. Okay, same thing, layer mask, invert it, and then just kind of paint the white brush on. You can make exact selections for this stuff, but unless you're really sloppy, I don't find it necessary to do that. But for some finer photos, I will do that, mainly if it's a print or something. But most of these I know are just going on social media. See the before, after. So extremely subtle, but in this it might just look like I'm taking a portrait. Maybe if someone would think it's for the jeans, for the shirt. But with this, it kind of just really brings the watch out and makes it pop. So I think that makes it look much better. I might skip this one just because, so it was for a hat and it's relatively small and it's the only red in the photo, so this one kind of enhances itself on its own, kind of in a midday, you know, shot in grease, with this red hat just really popping out. But if I was to selectively enhance it, it would be exactly what we just did. And now for this one, I want to show you a difference of the technique I'm doing in Photoshop opposed to in Lightroom. So I'm going to move forward with the same thing I always do. Bring up the exposure, drop the highlights, bring up saturation. Got a little too warm. Okay. I believe I've actually already edited this photo, so I already did enhance this just a little bit. So this might be a little bit overboard, but just for purposes of this tutorial. So I am going to turn on my backslash key, and I'm just going to brush in this product. And with a smaller brush, just kind of fix that up. Backslash. And that is too much because I did already enhance it, so I think I had a feeling it was going to be too much. But even that, 70%, you know, before, after, it does just give the product a nice little pop. Kind of the most pungent, the most saturated part of the image probably is the product, so I think it does stand out in that. So that is just kind of layer masking in selective edits through Camera Raw on Photoshop. So in Lightroom you'd be using the radial filter, which the graduate filter I use sometimes in Lightroom, but this one is really tough because it's very limiting. There's not many objects in real life that are perfect oval shapes or something like this. We're going to put the filter on this and bring up the exposure. Sorry, invert it because we want it to affect what's inside. So if you look closely at this, this is coming out because of the oval, and this is dark, this is dark. It kind of, when you use a radial filter, you just have to be careful because it's not the exact shape. It does look sloppy. Like if someone was looking at this, they would know that you brightened it, where if you brighten stuff in here in Photoshop and Camera Raw, it's a little bit more stealthy. I'll show you guys one more example of that. Here's a good one. So if I was to do what I did in Camera Raw and Photoshop on this photo in Lightroom, I'd be using a radial filter, invert to affect what's inside the filter, and just bring up the exposure. And as you can see, there becomes this halo around the image and it doesn't affect it too nicely. So like some parts right around are very bright and it looks like you brightened it, and then some areas are dark around. It's just not as selective nice. And even if you tighten it up to this, then you're also limiting the product, because now this isn't getting any of the effect you did. This isn't, the edges aren't. So I really just think the best way to enhance brand photos is through Photoshop, and it's through Adobe Camera Raw. It's a very subtle thing. It honestly, as you guys saw me do it, I'm talking pretty in depth, but it took about 30 seconds a photo. So I mean, it's well worth the time. Yeah, I think that's it for this one, guys. So I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, just shoot me a message on Instagram or YouTube. And if you guys like the content, please like and subscribe. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these, so hope to see you on the next one.